Hey everyone, it's your favorite host, Marcus Norman of the Gentleman Style Podcast Show. And today, we are in for a treat. This is going to be a very dynamic episode, and we're going to deep dive into what us want to know. And we need answers. We've gone through 2 years of pandemic, and I love these Q&A sections. I have the man for the job who's here on the Gentleman Style Podcast Show that is going to spill the tea on what we've all had questions for. Stay tuned. Stay with us. Here we go. Welcome to the Gentleman Style Podcast Show. If you are just tuning in for the first time, I am your host, Marcus of the Gentleman Style Podcast Show, your favorite gentleman. And today I have with me coming to the stage, Robert Yoho, previously retired Dr. MD. My guest today is 67 years old and calls himself a healthcare whistleblower. He practiced medicine in the United States and retired 2 years ago. Sharp guy, still on it. And he's here today to spill and answer some of our questions, the big questions that we've all had for a very long time. And now he has gathered the data and the information and is here to share through his book and through his works what we've all been curious about. He was a board certified emergency physician and cosmetic surgery, so he's done it all. He has recently published 2 books, Butchered by Healthcare and Hormone Secrets. Help me welcome to the stage Dr. Robert Yoho. Welcome, Doctor. How are you?
I'm great. And Marcus, that was a lovely introduction. And you, some people munch it up. I've been retired more like 3 or 4 years now. That was written earlier.
How's retirement going?
Well, it's a full-time job because I've made it my mission to tell the truth about healthcare and our current problem, which I call the fungus because of the censors. So your listeners can listen to that.
Yes, sir. And we're talking about the fungus that has plagued us for the past 2 to 3 years, y'all. So we are going to deep dive in. But doctor, tell us about yourself. How has it been? You have years of extensive experience in the medical profession. How was it?
It was a nightmare, Marcus. It was, and like anyone else, my philosophy is to try as hard as I can and hustle the whole time. So I work very hard. And sometimes when you put your nose to the grindstone, all you get out of it is a flat nose. That's a laugh line, but it's kind of true. My kids are switching jobs every 2 years, so they get upgrades in their pay and they get more new experiences every 2 years. And that's the modern corporate way to go. But when you catch the train to becoming a doctor, you commit yourself to decades. And I mean, you commit yourself to a lifetime of programmed activity. And it maybe is not the best personal growth, although it's challenging. And, you got to be reasonably bright to do it. We have doctors are an elite group. There are 1 million of us, and it's the largest smart group in America. We have an average IQ of 130, but we're programmed to act in a certain way, and I think it takes away from our reasoning capacities and our flexibility. And we're more like trying to do what the last guy did, so we don't get in trouble now, and it makes us very conservative. It's a consuming job between taking care of your patients, trying to keep up with whatever you're doing, and the Affordable Health Care Act turned 40% of our time into clicking on computers. In other words, they mandated medical records that were on the computers, and literally, I mean, your listeners aren't going to believe this, but they can search and confirm it. But 40% of most doctors' time is going home at night and trying to click on the computers so they get paid. It's crazy.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
It's been a tragedy. This healthcare situation that we've been in, starting with Obamacare, but healthcare is something that's plagued us for a really long time. because it just seems so corrupt. It seems just not built to win, right? With the prices. I mean, I have gone through, I've heard of people going through numerous levels of prescription. And the prices seem outrageous. It's almost impossible to afford decent medicine without the assistance of an employer, without the assistance of some kind of insurance company. But even still, the co-pays are getting outrageous as well. I mean, there's like numerous levels of the same medicine. There's different families or genres of them, and it just seems just not built to win. Am I right?
Yeah, you put your finger on it. We actually spend twice per person what any other company spends on healthcare. We spend 4 trillion on healthcare, which is the same size as the federal government roughly. And so, I mean, it's an outrage. The entire thing is built to extract more money, and it's run by corporations, and it's resulted in substandard care. Literally 50% of what we do in America as doctors is either ineffective or actually harmful. And that's not an academically controversial statement. I have plenty of references in Butchered by Healthcare, which is what we're going to, I think, primarily talk about. See that image of that guy in the white coat with the gold stacked at his feet? I mean, this is what healthcare has become about. And it's an inflammatory title and an inflammatory cover, but it's all true. I mean, healthcare is like an unbelievable mess, and navigating it takes physician level expertise. I mean, you have to be on your toes if you don't want to get butchered by healthcare, if you have a major problem.
Yes, sir. So, doctor, I'm going to ask the tough question: is there corruption in the pharmaceutical industry? Do you feel, in your years of experience, is there actual corruption and bribery going on?
Yeah. Well, this is, you put your needle in the most tender part of the whole thing. But before we go on, let me just do a 10-second disclaimer. I'm forced to do this by the lawyers.
Absolutely.
This is not medical care. Use this information at your own risk. And if you have a problem, you have to find yourself a licensed provider who can take care of you. But the answer to that is Big Pharma is the most criminal industry in history, as measured by their criminal settlements with U.S. federal prosecutors. They've lost $86 billion in judgments and settlements to civil plaintiffs and the prosecutors since 2000, and they have thousands of criminal records. The payoffs since 2004 they're on a Wikipedia page your listeners can immediately access. Just search for Wikipedia criminal settlements pharmaceutical companies. And there's 3 of these entities, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and GlaxoSmithKline, that have paid individual settlements in excess of $2 billion each. And Pfizer had an anti-inflammatory named Bextra that caused 50,000 deaths. They knew about it ahead of time, and they rolled out the drug anyway. But the amazing thing about this is, even with these settlements, the industry is phenomenally profitable. It's certainly the profits are far larger than any other industry in the country. And they run the show with the U.S. Congress and Senate because they can afford to bribe everybody off. And these are called campaign contributions and various, things that's completely legal in the United States. But, I believe it should be classified as bribery.
But there's systems in place, right? The government is here to protect the citizens, right? Such programs like the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, or they're supposed to be looking out for our best interests, correct, doctor?
So the Food and Drug Administration has been completely purchased by Big Pharma. And the way this works is, since the early 2000s, the revenues of the FDA, which are $5 billion, is a tiny thing compared to the 4 trillion in healthcare dollars. The revenues are 50% supplied directly by the pharmaceutical companies in the form of user fees. User fees are incurred during the patent review process. And so when he who pays the piper calls the tune. And we must regard the FDA, which is the regulatory agency of both our food and our drugs, as wholly in the pockets of these companies, and essentially a branch of the marketing department. And anything that comes out of the FDA must be regarded not with suspicion, but as a lie, a complete lie. So it's a mess, and they're not doing their job. And there's still statutes and regulations that surround them. And in theory, we may be able to beat up on them through legal channels if we find a judge that's telling the truth and isn't bought off. But the FDA is a total mess, and they work together to fake the drug patent studies. They use statistical manipulation. They corrupt research subcontractors in other countries. And 75% of the research is not done in America anymore. And my fantasy about some of these subcontractors is that they are a kid with a baseball cap in a basement in Pakistan turning out a fake, fully faked studies. I'm sure that's not completely true, but it's the image I always talk about. And so Peter Gurcha, who was one of the founders of Cochrane, he wrote, "The pervasive scientific misconduct has led to a research literature where one has to dig deeply among the few gems to find the few gems among all the garbage." And one other proof of this thing is the British Medical Journal, which is sort of the last medical journal that's any good. They had an editorial title last year in July, "Time to assume that health research is fraudulent until proven otherwise." So you can't believe a word you read in the medical journals. I mean, it's just a mess. They're all prostitutes. Their editors are paid hundreds of thousands of dollars each year by the medical industry, and corporate ghostwriters fabricate more than half of all drug studies and even some textbooks.
This is painful. This is groundbreaking. Doctors,
It's brutal.
it's brutal. It's terrible. And we've been living under this fog for years. Doctor, I want to ask the hard question. In your opinion, and this is not medical advice for the safety of my guests, but in your opinion, does the vaccine cure COVID? Does it actually
The Jabberwocky, you mean?
The Jabberwocky, forgive me. The Jabberwocky. Does the fungus, the Jabberwocky actually work in dealing with the epidemic?
Well, the Jabberwocky has been an unmitigated disaster, and we have had to study it post-marketing. See, we have release of documents from the major company that foisted this thing on us. And it's now clear, excuse me, it's now clear that they knew what a disaster it was from the start. And because of their the mitigation of their liability through a law that was passed in the late 1990s, they don't have to worry about doing anything. They can lie, cheat, and steal and kill people. But they understood how bad this thing was from the start, and they understood the fatalities. In the first 3 months, there were around 1,500 fatalities. Now, any ordinary Jabberwocky gets taken down if there are 50 fatalities. But this thing, there are probably a couple 100,000 fatalities in the United States, and I'll develop the lines of evidence for that in a moment. But they knew after 3 months this thing was a disaster, and it should have been taken down the first 2 weeks, because 50 fatalities certainly occurred during that time. So we have a number of lines of evidence that tell us how bad this thing is, and one of the lines of evidence is we have a database that is a voluntary reporting database called the VAERS, and that thing has proven that there are now 26,000 and counting fatalities. But the problem with that database is that it's underreported, and some of the people say it's underreported by a factor of 100. Now, probably not for fatalities, because you can count the bodies, right? But it's certainly underreported by a factor of 10 to 20. So multiply 10 to 20 by 26,000. That's how many Jabberwocky-related deaths there have been in the U.S., right? Now, worse, there's two other lines of evidence that are quite robust. And one is that we have the military whistleblowers through Senator Johnson, and they have a complete database of what's happened to the military. And neurological diseases, for example, have gone up by, I think it's 20 times. I mean, it's an unbelievable scene. And a lot of people have dropped dead, and these are very young people. Obviously, they're military age people, and all these other diseases have been. But the most suggestive information we have is the insurance company data. Now, these are data with millions of people in it, and the insurance company is documenting that Americans and people from other parts of the world are dropping dead at a rate that's 140. It's 40% more than prior. And for the millennials, and I think you're a millennial, the drop dead rate is 84% greater than before. Now, these are not figures that can be contested. But and it all happened right as this toxic thing was rolled out. It didn't happen in 2020. It happened in 2021 and is still continuing into 2022. 40%. Now, they call this, the chance of this happening by chance alone they're zero. They're 1 in a million or 1 in 10 million or something like that. They call it a 6 sigma impossibility that this would happen by chance alone. So we are dying, and it is happening, and the insurance companies are documenting it, and it's precisely in the same time frame that this new medication was introduced.
Robert, we have a question from our audience. Thank you for breaking that down so delicately and explaining that for us and that we needed to hear. We have a question from our audience. What advice would you give the employees or young woman, young man out there whose company or employer
I get it. Okay, I get
requires?
Yeah, yes, requires it. Yeah. So my advice is, after what I've read and what I understand, and I work on this full time, and I watch the propaganda that's being foisted on us, and I realize that plenty of people have made it through, and my own kids have been exposed to this risk. But from what I know, I think the problems, and in fact, the long-term problems are unknown. We can't say that you're gonna die if you 5 years from now, because that's something we've never seen before. But that's possible. There are suggestions of long-term infertility and other problems. So, I mean, I got to tell you, if you have children who are being subjected to some sort of mandate, my advice is homeschool or leave the state. And if you have some sort of jackass employers that are going along with this, my advice is quit your job. It's time to get a new job anyway. And there are endless possibilities out there. You're never locked in. And I would not subject myself or my kids to this under any circumstances. There are just too many opportunities. We don't live in Australia, and we don't live in Canada. In Canada, it's almost impossible to avoid. You can't even leave the country and come back in without having your QR code or whatever it is that documents it. But I think it's just too risky. I'm not saying the ones that have already gotten it are in terrible trouble. My personal opinion is that if you've made it through the first 12 to 18 months, you're probably cool. You're without a significant problem. You're probably okay. But we just don't know. And there are suggestions that this thing has long-term issues that may be associated with it. But it hasn't been around but a year and a half now, less than that.
We are going to go to a quick commercial break. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. Stay with us. We'll be right back. You guys stay tuned for Robert Yoho. We'll be right back.
If you're looking for a reliable professional trucking and logistics service, you've come to the right place. Musa Trucking is a veteran-owned and operated premier transportation provider that can help with all of your trucking and logistics needs. Musa is revolutionizing the trucking industry through strategic partnerships, the development of core personnel, and the use of cutting-edge technology. Our inventory system ensures that cargo ends up divided into the right trucks and reaching the correct destination. Our drivers are dedicated to transporting goods efficiently and safely. Contact us today to get started by visiting the website on the screen or by calling 757-756 5246.
Good day, podcast listeners. This is your boy, Marcus Norman of Gentleman Style Podcast Show. I wanted to let you guys know that we will be rolling out a new feature and adding a join sponsor button next to the subscriber button here at the bottom of your screen. Once you click the button, it will display 3 membership levels. Gentleman Gentry, which is our entry level, Duke Duchess, which is our season level, and the Emperor and Empress, which is our most sophisticated level, which you will receive unique perks and benefits at each differing level and gain access to our community tab. We will also be sharing polls, upcoming events, and interviews, as well as receive feedback from our sponsors directly. Your support helps me find new and exciting guests to bring to the stage live. Well, in order to get the higher end speakers, it requires, you guessed it, money. So thank you for tuning in to my channel. And if becoming a sponsor sounds good to you, then select the join button below and choose your desired sponsor level. Let's continue to grow and serve the future of generations of men and women to come. Love you guys. Bye. We are back to the Gentleman Style Podcast Show. We have Robert Yoho, retired MD. He is spilling some of the tea that we have all been going through and surviving these past 2 to 3 years. And he has shared some of the secrets and his experiences after practicing medical cosmetic surgery. And he's been a doctor, and he just retired 3 years ago. And he's sharing some of that tea on the Gentleman Style Podcast Show today. And we're going to dive in and we're going to talk about his book. Robert, what can readers expect with this book? What can readers look forward to in this book? How long is
it? Well, who ever reads anymore, right? I mean, look, I was a bookworm for decades. You're obviously you're reading because you read my stuff. But the easiest way into this material is probably through podcasts like yours. And I think the 2 best podcasts are Peter Breggin, Breggin, and RFK Jr. podcast, which is at Children's Health Defense. So, but as far as my book goes, it's like a little textbook that tells the story about all of medical care. And I start out with, I describe the insurance companies. I describe hospitals. Hospitals, insurance companies clip 20% of the total revenues right off the top of that $4 trillion. And it's not something that happens in other countries. And I think it's an outrage to have a non-healthcare system of management that takes so much of it. Hospitals are at least a third of U.S. healthcare, possibly 40%. And they are absolutely ruthless pirates, and they're basically interested in money and their current activities, which you can. I have a podcast about someone that was butchered. His daughter was butchered by a hospital on my podcast, which is you can find it robertyoho.substack.com. And I mean, pharma and the stories about pharma, and that's all in my book. And about the journals are probably our most corrupt medical specialty is psychiatry, because they use drugs that are poorly rooted in science. For the most part, they never managed to do sugar pill control trials on their drugs. Double-blind control is not something that's much of a feature of psychiatric drugs. And that's hard to believe, because they're pills. You think you could do that, but you have to find somebody to take to get randomized who doesn't have the problem. And of course, that'll show how toxic the drugs are, because they're terribly addictive, terribly toxic, and they're overused phenomenally. And I mean, I would almost say that, well, I would certainly say that we're better off without those drugs than how we use them currently, because they've turned many problems that come and go, I mean, not crazy all the time for the most part. these things come and go, and they've turned these things into chronic problems because once you get addicted to the drug, you're stuck. The use of these drugs has been closely correlated with increase in our various social programs and the spending on disability and so on. And the smart observers think it's caused by the drugs. We've got a crooked heart industry. We use these surgeries that hardly work at all, if at all, and this angioplasty, which is sort of the same story. Low back pain is an immense industry. The operations don't work as they're currently used. Maybe they would work as if the art of medicine was better employed, but they're applied indiscriminately, mostly to young people who have back injuries on the job because the workman's compensation pays so well. And I mean, I described the opioids, which a lot of your listeners probably understand pretty well. That was a single company that was privately held by a single family, marketed OxyContin, which was to anyone with any kind of painful condition. Prior to their criminal activity, essentially, we use these drugs very carefully on post-surgical pain and end-of-life pain, cancer pain, that sort of thing. But the plaintiff's lawyers took those guys down. It's one of two companies that have been put out of business by lawyers because they murdered. There were 100,000 overdoses plus a year, and that trend continues. Cancer treatment is also quite corrupt. The pharmaceutical companies have manufactured an exception to the no kickback rule in cancer drugs. And the doctors get 20% of any drug they administer in the office. So the ambition of these oncologists has become to fill a room with Barca loungers, recliners, and put cancer patients in every one and have them getting their treatments 7 days a week. And it's like a huge pharmaceutical farm. And the sick insight is that nearly all of the cancer treatments are complete failures. They measure the published success of a cancer treatment is 2 months of extended life. They only have about 6 or 8 diseases that they can treat effectively or have a potential to treat effectively. So if Marcus, if you and I were doctors and you told me, here, I invented this drug, sell it, and I'll give you 20%. That's called capping. It's a federal felony, and we could be put in jail. But that doesn't happen with the drug companies. They've got an exception. The amphetamines have been just a tragedy. I mean, we're now diagnosing ADHD for adults as well as children. This stuff has been known to be highly addictive, highly toxic for 50 to 75 years. I mean, the Japanese used these drugs in World War II to get the kamikaze pilots to run into our ships. And there's animal studies that show brain shrinkage if you use a lot of amphetamines. And then we're doing all these useless screening programs. The mammograms are a net failure when used as a screening or with somebody without symptoms, without lumps. We'd be better off if we only evaluated women who found lumps themselves and didn't make such a BFD of the whole thing. It's enormously expensive. The procedure is slightly risky, and the math just doesn't work. And the same thing with sticking that long scope up your backside for colon cancer, right? That whole thing as a screening procedure or looking at people who don't have any problems has been a mathematical failure because yeah.
Really?
Sorry. So I'm just ranting. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I mean, that's terrible.
Yeah.
It's such an invasive procedure.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't sound so good to me. The urologists like to stick their finger up your backside, and that doesn't work either because what they do is they check the blood for a blood test called PSA for prostate cancer. And when it's high, they do these painful biopsies up your backside. And then if the cancer is seen, frequently they recommend this horrible surgery called a radical prostatectomy, which it must create a quarter of the people get completely impotent the rest of their lives, and another quarter are peeing themselves all the rest of their lives and have to wear diapers. I don't know whether you've seen those ads for Depends diapers with a rough-looking 55-year-old men. That's who they're advertising to. They're advertising to the massive number of men who've been butchered by this surgery. And it's after with now, look, I'm not a urologist, I'm not a mathematician, but my simple analysis based on completely, this is all completely, it's not original material. This is reports of all the healthcare whistleblowers that I could find, 500 references. I don't think that surgery is ever justified, but maybe if it was used with the art of medicine rather than being applied almost indiscriminately like it is now, maybe it would make sense. But the other thing about it is it shortens your penis by about an inch. Now, maybe you've got an extra, but I don't. I wouldn't do it just for that reason. I'm making a joke. A joke. But
right.
you know about endoscopic knee surgery for knee arthritis. That, where they stick a scope in the knee and clean it up and nip it. That's a total failure. That has been studied using sham control surgeries. In other words, they make a little incision, pretend to do the operation, put you under anesthesia, and the other half the patients, they do the actual. It doesn't work. It's been totally debunked. The orthopedists, if you ask them about those studies, they know all about it. But it's still a $5 billion industry to this day.
I had orthoscopic knee surgery for a sports injury. The whole point of the surgery was to be, same day surgery, right? That's the selling point. You're supposed to be able to get in, get the surgery, get your knee repaired, and then walk out the same day without very little physical therapy. That was the appeal of it. And the attraction to it is like it's very evasive, small incisions here and there, no major scarring. That was the whole appeal, but it was a debacle because I ended up going from a couple hour surgery to a 2-week event. It was terrible.
Well,
and I still had 6 months of physical therapy.
They they took some of the padding out of your knee, and it does not regenerate. It never recovers, and in all likelihood, you're going to have a worse long-term result than if you'd never had the surgery and just put up with it. If you'd read those studies, and any of your listeners can look for sham surgery endoscopic knee studies, and you can find those things. There's 2 of them, and it absolutely proves with the strongest kind of medical evidence, which is a fake surgery study, that surgery is a complete failure. Now, there again, in the art of medicine, maybe there's a time, for example, if your knee is locking, that you need some sort of endoscopic knee surgery, but you're better off overall in most cases to be patient with the whole thing. Let your knee crackle a little bit and be a little sore, take your anti-inflammatories and so on and so forth.
That's huge. This is huge. Oh my gosh.
No, there are successful surgeries. Okay. The hip replacements, I think it was voted the best surgery of the last century, right? It really works well if you need it, if your hip is truly beat up and you have to have it. And I'm headed up to get a shoulder replacement. That's not as good, but it's not, my shoulder's bone on bone, and I want to continue to be active, lift weights and all that stuff. And, sometimes when you're 68, you're kind of out of luck. You got to take these risks. The knees are pretty good. The hips are very good. But a lot of surgery is done for really thin indications.
And monetary gain.
Of course.
Mr. Robert, what can you recommend? Are there any natural remedies that we can take because of the Jabberwocky? Instead of taking the Jabberwocky, we can take this thing. Are there any things that you can share?
Absolutely. Now, if you're concerned about the fungus itself, right, which shouldn't be a concern now because a minor variant has swept around the world and basically immunized us all. And you have to understand that this is, some people claim they've gotten it more than once, but if you had it once, you're not going to get a severe variant again. So, and obviously kids should never get this thing. They should never get the Jabberwocky because it kills far more of them than the fungus, right? Pregnant women are a special category. They should never be mistreated. And there are some studies that show 85% of their babies die after the Jabberwocky, right? And so this thing is, if you have no symptoms, you cannot spread the virus. It does not teleport, right? So those are the basics of the background.
Are there any opportunities for us to seek care? Are there any specialists in the field that we can trust?
There's several groups that will treat you online, and this is one of the great things in the modern era. We can access consultations in other states, and these people are not expensive. And if you have the fungus or think you're getting the fungus, or you've got it documented with a test, you can call the Frontline Critical Care Alliance. We can leave a link in the show notes, and the AAPS, the American Academy of Physicians and Surgeons, they have a protocol that you can learn about. And there's several other ones. America's Frontline Doctors is very good. They have legal advice. But as far as supplements go, push your vitamin D, try to get your levels up near 100, and start out with 5,000 international units if you're under 200 pounds, and 10,000 if you're over, right? And then you may need more than that. A lot of people need more than that. You can get your own levels tested by going on lifeextension.com, and they will set it up to have your blood tested at a local blood lab. And so get your vitamin D levels up, and you may have to take more than I mentioned to do that. It doesn't change rapidly. You can test it every month or two. Zinc is very critically important for any viral illness, and the doses are 50 to 100 milligrams. 100 milligrams for the first few days after you're symptomatic. Quercetin, Quercetin, is some sort of material that drives the zinc into the cells and helps. And zinc, of course, is well known to treat viral illnesses. You can find it at every health food store, and it's around. So those are over-the-counter treatments that you can start with. And the real tragedy of this disease is the suppression through propaganda of treatments that work. And the prescription drugs that work have been used by billions of people around the world. And you can find out about that on the AAPS website. And you can go to my material to read more if you want to get a little deeper into the material. Robert Yoho, RobertYoho.substack.com, and RobertYohoAuthor.com, which is my main website. So anyway, it's kind of a horror show. I thought the worst thing was the suppression of therapies. And you guys have heard this thing about the horse medicine. Everybody has. And this is one of Big Pharma's typical strategies, is to create a bunch of fake stories. And thousands of stories were created about this horse thing. And it was, frankly, horse, SHIT, what they said, So I thought the worst thing was the concealment of these therapies, because what really red-pilled me was I found out that 85% of the fatalities could have been prevented by the use of these inexpensive medications and even supplements. But instead, the companies provided a string of propaganda, and they completely dominate. These pharmaceutical companies completely dominate the network news. I mean, it's like 95+% of the funding, and it's 75% of the rest of television. So these have become, along with the medical journals, completely unreliable, along with the government pronouncements by, and Marcus, I got to hand it to you. You got a good nose for BS, and that's the most important. That's the most important thing to get the best results.
I have a confession. I have a confession to make. I have not taken the test. I have not taken any of these. I don't believe it. I don't trust it. Right. And when I don't trust you, I can't get behind something that was rushed. It was in the span of a year or less. We have now seen an increase in deaths. It's outrageous, and I fail to have believed that my government had my best interest at heart.
Why would you suspect that a mobster organization would give you something that was a treatment or a prevention that would work. Why would you ever trust? Why would you ever trust these people? And I've got a quote here about whether they're about their mobster quality. Peter Ross was a former Pfizer marketing vice president. He wrote, "It's scary how many similarities there are between this industry and the mob. Obscene amounts of money, killings and deaths, bribing politicians and others. The difference is all these people in the drug industry look upon themselves as law-abiding citizens. However, when they get together as a group, it's almost like when you have war atrocities. People do things they don't think they're capable of because the group can validate what you're doing is okay." Another CEO of Harry Lloyd, who was a Park Davis pharmaceutical CEO, he said, "If we put horse manure in a capsule, we could sell it to 95% of these doctors." Now, why would you ever trust people like this? And they can't even keep their mouths shut about their own criminality. I mean, it literally, it's nightmarish, and it's hard for me to believe how powerful propaganda is, and it's the thing we're facing. This is the hardest truth of today, is that the First Amendment is vanishing, and the tech companies have essentially destroyed it. We'll see what Musk does with Twitter, but we can't hold out any great hope for anything that happens with one of these billionaires.
Oh, we can't. One of the billionaires is Bill Gates, my favorite, the biggest advocate of this program. We have one quick commercial break. We'll be right back. Robert Yoho, y'all. Stay tuned. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Are you a local business looking to offer your customers easy access to cash without having to travel miles? We're here to help. At Norman Legacy Investments, we provide free ATMs with free installation that provide a suitable investment for your business. Even better, we offer you some profit sharing and handle everything from start to finish. Just reach out to us today to schedule a free consultation.
Support for Gentleman Style Podcast is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming champions of the world. Manscaped offers you precision engineering tools for your family jewels. Manscaped just launched their 4th-generation trimmer, the Lawnmower 4.0. You heard that right, the 4.0. Join over 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer for you. 20% off free worldwide shipping with the code GENTSTYLE at manscaped.com.
I'm Marcus Norman, bringing fresh vibes to hot topics surrounding culture, relationships, business, finance, sex, dating, faith, and everything in between. Whether you're into passive income opportunities, trending topics and useful relationship tips, or dynamic guest speakers, there's something for everyone. You can expect all that and more every week. If you're down with this content, then consider joining our growing community by subscribing to Gentleman Style Podcast and smash the bell to get on our VIP list. Your support means the world. Thanks for watching. Link to my channel.
We are back to the Gentleman Style Podcast show. We have Robert Yoho, retired MD, and he is spilling the tea and debunking a lot of the myths and stimulating our cortex here, right? Our minds. We have been lied to for the past 75 years about the industries that and the government that's supposed to have our best interests at heart. And he's here to spill and share and give back through his book, Butchered by Healthcare. Butchered by Healthcare. What to do about doctors, big pharma, and corrupt government ruining your health and medical care. Doctor, you wrote another book. Can you speak to that? Can you share some secrets on that book?
Absolutely. How I got into this thing was as a cosmetic surgeon. This is my other book, and it's Hormone Secrets. And that is a Mexican mask that I found in a Houston restaurant. Let me show you what it looks like. Hang on one second here. And I superimposed the names of the hormones on this mask. It's very colorful. There's a picture of me standing next to this 4-foot mask. And so this is actually represents what is going on inside, and I've got to do this the PC way, a person's mind. Now, this is a female image, so, maybe there's some little sexist quality to this. But anyway, we're all made up of hormones. It's exceedingly important. I've written, I treated my patients with hormones because they frequently came to me with hormone deficiency symptoms, and they ended up, most plastic surgeons just cut on them, that do surgery on them, and that doesn't really help their hormone deficiency. So we've got a lot of other stuff to talk about, but I will read a couple of testimonials about how well they work. And I offered this to my patients for free. Basically, I felt like they were paying me enough for the surgery so I could afford to give them a hormone pellet. And they'd get 3 months of relief. They'd feel great. So this is a male testimonial from an 82-year-old retired CEO of a major media company named Stephen. He said, "I had lost all strength and I was sitting in a wheelchair in a Palm Springs nursing home. The staff had to lift me in and out of bed. I was inches from being snuffed out. Then my doctor started coming in every week and giving me testosterone shots. In 6 weeks, I stood up and walked out of there, back into my life." So the women have remarkable stories too. And, my experience is more with women than men. And I'm going to give you a teaser story about hormone therapy that, we can follow up on hormones at another time. It's a long and complicated story. It involves, drug use and the street hormones and all this other stuff and other stories. But basically hormones, the bioidentical hormones can't be patented. So the industry and the FDA conspired to put black box warnings on them, which are a very serious warning, claiming they gave people cancer and blood clots and all kinds of other things, it was a pack of lies. And that's what originally stimulated my interest in the whole thing. But my quick story about hormones is, and no one's going to believe this unless they spend $3 and get my ebook, and then they can see all these books are available for $3. This is not a money-making project. None of this is a money-making project. The story is that if we gave estrogen to all the women over 50, 85% of the Alzheimer's would be prevented. Now, just think about that.
Wow.
Now, that sounds like total nonsense. It's like your listeners are calling BS on me right now. But what I did in Hormone Secrets is I have an appendix C, and it's got 75 references that show that that's true. Now, this is covered up. This is something that the industry doesn't want revealed because estrogen is cheap. It can't be patented. It's nothing like $1,000 pill Alzheimer's drugs, which don't work instantly. Not even the developers of those things claim that they're any good. And if you have any listeners that have had good luck with them, I'd like to talk to them because I've never heard of anyone that's there. There's 10 of them, and they're several $1,000s a month. So anyway, that's the story with Hormone Secrets. We got a lot more to talk about
Yes,
the corruption side.
Yes, sir. You have an incredible mind, and you've practiced medicine for 67 plus years. What are some?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. What are some final conclusions? What are some conclusions after your great works? What have you known to be true for yourself, at least?
Well, I'm 68 years old, so I haven't practiced medicine quite that long, and I did quit several years ago. So I think, for your listeners, I think one important thing I want to say, and I have to present this every time, is we do have miracles, and doctors do miracles all the time, and you don't want to go off and think that alternative medicine is the equal of regular medicine, because just because there are problems with aircraft design doesn't mean that magic carpets fly. Right.
Right.
So there's a lot of magic carpets out there that are nonsense, but there are also many cures and many treatments that have been suppressed by medical industry, which is only interested in the patented drugs because it's so much more powerful.
Yes, sir.
Now, did you want me to address Bill Gates and the worldwide problem? I mean,
Yes.
one of the thing that everybody wants to know is WTF is going on worldwide, ? What is going on? We've got Australia in shambles. We've got Canada right on our border that looks almost as bad. We've got trends going on in Europe and New Zealand that don't look good. And they seem to have backed off this narrative. Is this the end of it? Well, I got bad news. It's not the end of it. And so this is another book that was written by a friend of mine, COVID-19 and the Global Predators. This is available for $3 on Kindle too. And it's a huge book that if you have to buy a hard copy of it, it's it's $25 or something. And this guy and his wife, he's a psychiatrist who is originally his career was exposing psychiatry, which, as I mentioned, is a mess. And earlier on in the process of this last fungal attack, he figured out what went on, and it's just practically a miracle that he managed to do it. And he tied in these billionaires, the Chinese communist government, and people like Fauci, and kind of put it all together in a book. This book is easier, and this is probably the worldwide bestseller right now for the last 4 or 5 months. It's sold over 1 million copies. This is by R.F. Kennedy and his group, and it says it's about Fauci, but it actually is a very well-written indictment of Gates and Big Pharma and basically the global war on democracy. That's the subtitle. And so I recommend this one. And if you go to my websites, you can find summaries of these two books. So if you're not a great reader, you don't have to read the whole thing. So it's The Real Anthony Fauci by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and COVID-19 and the Global Predators, We Are the Prey by Peter and Ginger Breggin, Breggin. And the best podcasts are Breggin's podcast and RFK Jr.'s podcast. I mean, it's a horrible scene. And, we don't have time to get into it, but the hospitals they're incentivized to actually knock people off who have this disease. I mean, it's amazing.
There's an incentive for doctors and physicians to take us out.
You can't imagine what's going on in the hospitals. They get an incentive. They get about 100,000 per fungal patient, right? The fungus, the code word fungus, right? They get about 100,000 extra, and this was originally rationalized as a reason. The reason was that they were losing revenues on other kinds of diseases and so on during the problem. So they get extra money for making the diagnosis. They get extra money for treating with this horrible drug called remdesivir, which has been approved to treat the problem, but actually kills about half the people it's given to. It was originally an Ebola drug. Ebola is that horrible hemorrhagic disease that knocks you off within 2 days. And it can't really be communicated very far because everybody within a radius of 30 feet gets it and drops dead immediately. So Ebola is not an infectious problem. It only kills people in small radiuses. But that drug was originally tested for Ebola, and it was a complete failure, but it was approved for this disease that we currently have because it didn't work. Now just think about that for a minute, Marcus. If it worked, they would have to stop the emergency use authorization. It didn't work, so it was approved. And so the hospitals are incentivized to give this medication, and they are incentivized to put people on ventilators, which are almost a total failure. And you're not going to believe this, but they are incentivized with each death. On average, 100,000, sometimes 300,000 extra paid for the hospital. Now,
to keep giving this.
I know you don't believe this story, right? Nobody. It's too fantastical for anyone to swallow whole. And your BS meter should be lit up red right now because it sounds like I'm a nut. But what I want your listeners to do is to go on my Substack and listen to the episode about Scott Scherer, Scherer. And my Substack again is robertyoho.substack.com. listen to that episode, and it's just a tear-jerking story, and it has all the references about what's going on with these hospitals and the organizations that are having to fight this. Sometimes they have to get the local sheriffs to go and jerk these people out of the hospital, take them home, and then they can get treated properly. But the hospitals are incentivized by the federal government. I mean, this is completely documented. They're incentivized to mistreat our campers with this fungal disease, right, as we call it.
Right.
It's an unbelievable story. I mean, that's part of the most dystopian part of the entire thing. And
why kill off your citizens? Why kill your taxpayers? Why do you think?
Now, the simplest solution is this medication that's been the most profitable one in history, that we call the Jabberwocky. That's not just the most profitable medication in history. It's probably the most profitable product in history. Just wrap your head around that. More profitable than Coca-Cola, more profitable than the iPhone. It's an unbelievable thing. And the money that is generated is spread to all these different sources, the tech companies and everyone else, to incentivize all this behavior. And the Gates is a well-known population control guy. In fact, his Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, according to one reference I read, was originally the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for Population Control, right? They changed the name, as I understood. I don't have a good source for that. I saw it on a video. Maybe it's a crazy video. But he and his father were very interested in Paul Ehrlich and the population bomb. Now, that's a book that's before your time, but that scared the bejesus out of everybody in the 70s. And it looked as if we were going to eat ourselves out of house and home with the expanding population. But actually what happened was exactly the opposite. African starvation went down to the single digits probably right now. It was in the mid to low double digits, at the time the population bomb was written, and things didn't look good. But the technology has improved. The total population of the world is going to level out, and it's, we understand the demographics or the mathematics of it, and it's going to level out and decline. It's already declining in some developed countries like Japan. So the whole thing was completely misplaced fears. But Gates is essentially a eugenicist, and he has slipped many times and talked about his vision for population control. And obviously this thing that has been rolled out and developed and the censorship around it, it has killed a lot of people, and we don't know how bad it's going to get. But my suspicion is if you make it 18 months, you're cool. But nobody knows. Yeah. We've never seen anything like this before.
It's brand new. Mr. Yoho, sir, what are there any final thoughts you would want to leave to our audience? Any questions that I missed that I should have asked you that you'd like to leave with my audience? The young man, the young boy out in the audience who needs to know this is important.
Well, there are some good things that have developed in the last 2 years. And the first good thing is you can see most any doctor you want. If you have an oddball condition, you can teleport to Harvard or Stanford or wherever you want and see them on Skype or whatever they permit. And, if you can afford a few $100s or a few $1,000s, you can get a second opinion. So that's been a big, big important thing. The second thing that's really good is we have patient advocacy groups. And while these are sponsored by Big Pharma, they often contain idealistic people who are willing to spend their time telling you what's up with a given disease or problem and educating you, and sometimes suggesting when your doctors are doing it wrong. So you can get good medical care anywhere in the United States, but sometimes you need guidance from a major medical center to tell your doctor, and all they have to do is write a letter to your doctor telling him what to do, and they have to do it, or they'll get sued if anything untoward happens. So those are two positive notes. The last thing is you have to develop your own sense of skepticism, and I admire yours, Marcus. My wife is black, and she says that black people are very skeptical because they've been lied to over and over again. And Nietzsche said, right? He said that I'm not disappointed that you lied to me. I'm disappointed that I can never trust you again. So that's my philosophy, and I'm sure it's yours.
It is. Mr. Robert, how can my audience connect with you? How can we learn more? How can we continue to be skeptical?
Well, all these books that I put forth are $3 on Kindle. And so if you can figure out how to read on Kindle, it's very easy. Just download the app and download Kindle. And I'm no great fan of Amazon. They're a global predator too. But my podcasts and my platform is at robertyohoauthor.com and at robertyoho.substack.com. And that's where you can listen to some of these things and judge for yourself from the credibility. The thing I like about podcasts is you guys, we can judge your credibility from your manner and your speech. It's not like reading something that's sort of dry and not as clear. But you can judge the credibility of my podcast by listening to my guests.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you all. Thank you, Doctor, for Mr. Robert, for giving back in this way. This has been a tremendous episode, and this has been impactful and insightful, and it helps us learn that we weren't just alone. We weren't alone. We weren't crazy in what we were thinking, that it actually was fraud, and it was meant to hurt us. And now we know better, and now we can move better and move forward in a better direction. So I thank you, sir.
You're so welcome, Marcus. It's been a pleasure.
It's been an absolute pleasure. And I thank you all for tuning in to the Gentleman Style Podcast Show. I hope this has been helpful. I'm going to put the website back on a page. I hope this has been helpful, and I hope this has been invaluable. It's absolutely made me feel not necessarily safer, but it's given me hope that I'm not alone and that we can get through this if we can continue to connect with honest people like Mr. Robert and his team who are doing God's work and giving back and sharing the information so that we can make it together. And we don't have to rely on our government. We don't have to rely on big pharma and all these other predators to take care of us. We are very capable of taking care of ourselves like we've always have. So thank you. I hope this message has been helpful. I hope it's been impactful. Like I always end every show. Take care of your friends, take care of your family, and always take care of business. This is Marcus Norman, your favorite gentleman, Gentleman Style Podcast Show, and retired MD Robert Yoho signing off. Love you guys. Bye.